Racist cop attacks black man, unaware. He's the new police chief. Part 1. The Wrong Move. The sun had barely started its descent over the city of Crestwood when Officer Daniel Parker, a 10-year veteran of the force, leaned against his patrol car, scanning the quiet neighborhood. He was itching for action. His shift had been dull, and boredom made him irritable. Then he saw him. A black man in a dark suit was walking down the sidewalk, carrying a leather briefcase. He moved with purpose, exuding confidence. But for Parker, that wasn't enough. Something about him felt wrong. Maybe it was the expensive suit in a part of town where most people wore worn-out jeans. Maybe it was the calm composure that Parker instinctively resented. Whatever it was, Parker decided then and there, this man didn't belong. Flashing lights bathed the street in red and blue as Parker flicked on his siren. The black man turned, eyebrows raised, and stopped walking as Parker pulled up beside him. "Hey, hands where I can see them," Parker barked, stepping out of the cruiser, hand resting on his holster. The man's expression remained neutral, almost amused, as he slowly raised his hands. He didn't look scared. "Is there a problem, officer?" His voice was deep, calm, and steady. Parker didn't like it. He was used to suspects stammering, pleading, or running. Not this. "You got ID?" Parker demanded, stepping closer. The man nodded and reached into his jacket. Parker saw the movement and snapped. He grabbed the man's wrist, yanked him forward, and slammed him against the hood of the police car. "What the hell?" The man grunted, his briefcase clattering to the ground. "You don't move unless I tell you to move," Parker growled, pressing his knee into the man's back. "You got drugs on you? Weapons?" A small crowd started to form. Phones came out. Cameras started rolling. "Officer," the man said evenly, still not struggling, still too calm. "I'm reaching for my wallet. My identification is in there. You asked for it." Parker didn't care. He was in control, and he was going to teach this man a lesson. "Stay where you are," Parker snapped. He yanked open the man's jacket, searching him roughly, looking for something, anything, to justify the force he was using. But there was nothing. And then a voice rang out. "What the hell is going on here?" A second patrol car had pulled up. Sergeant Miller stepped out. His face was pale, his mouth slightly open as he looked from Parker to the man pinned against the car. Parker smirked. "Finally, back up." "I got this one under control, Sarge," he said proudly. "Suspicious character. Probably trespassing." Miller didn't respond. He just stared at the man on the hood of the car. And then, slowly, the black man turned his head, locking eyes with the sergeant. In that instant, Parker's stomach dropped. Something was wrong. The black man smiled. It was a cold, knowing smile, and when he spoke, the words hit Parker like a freight train. "Sergeant Miller, is this how you train your officers?" Miller visibly swallowed. "Chief Williams," he stammered. Parker's entire body stiffened. "Chief?" He looked down at the man he had just slammed onto the hood of his car, the same man whose wrist he had twisted, the same man he had automatically assumed was a suspect. Chief Williams, the new police chief. Part 2, the chief's verdict. Parker's heart pounded in his chest. This had to be some kind of mistake. He stared at Chief Williams, trying to process what just happened. A black man, a police chief? No way. His mind scrambled for a way out, but there was none. Phones were recording, people were watching, and Sergeant Miller was turning pale. The chief slowly stood up, dusting off his suit, his composure unshaken despite the brutality Parker had just inflicted on him. He rolled his shoulders, glanced down at his briefcase still lying on the sidewalk, then looked directly at Parker. His gaze was piercing, calm, but deadly. "Sergeant Miller," Chief Williams said, adjusting his cuffs. "Would you mind explaining what just happened here?" Miller hesitated, glancing at Parker, then at the crowd, then back at the chief. "Sir, Parker cut in. He had to fix this before it spiraled. "Chief, I didn't know who you were," Parker stammered, his bravado gone. "You looked—" Williams raised an eyebrow. "I looked like what?" Parker hesitated. He was trapped. Anything he said now would only bury him deeper. Williams stepped forward, standing inches away from him. "You saw a black man in a suit walking down the street and assumed I was a criminal." His voice was even, controlled, but the weight of it was crushing. Parker opened his mouth, but no words came out. "I asked for your badge number," Williams continued. "You threw me against the car. I reached for my ID and you attacked me. Is that standard procedure?" Parker licked his lips. "You thought wrong," Williams interrupted. "But you didn't just make a mistake. You revealed exactly the kind of officer you are." The crowd murmured in agreement. People were still filming. Williams turned to Miller. "Sergeant, as of this moment, Officer Parker is suspended pending an investigation." The air sucked out of Parker's lungs. "Sir," Williams held up a hand. "Don't waste your breath." Parker's mouth went dry. This wasn't just an embarrassment. His entire career was now on the line. But the chief wasn't done. He turned to the onlookers. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to remember this moment," he said. "This is exactly why change is coming to this department, and it starts now." The crowd erupted in cheers. Parker felt his stomach drop. For years he had been able to get away with profiling, harassing, intimidating. But today he picked the wrong black man, and his days in uniform were numbered. Part 3. Parker fights back. Parker sat in his patrol car, staring at his trembling hands gripping the steering wheel. Suspended. His mind raced. This wasn't just about losing his badge. His entire reputation was on the line. Everything he had worked for, the control he had over the streets, the fear he instilled, it was all slipping away. He slammed his fist against the dashboard. This can't be happening. Parker grabbed his phone and dialed a number. The line rang twice before a deep voice answered. "Officer Parker, didn't expect to hear from you." It was Captain Reynolds, his longtime ally in the force, a man who believed in the old way of doing things. "We've got a problem," Parker muttered, checking his rearview mirror to make sure no one was watching him. "Chief Williams suspended me." Reynolds sighed. "I saw the video." Parker's stomach twisted. "So what?" "I didn't know who he was. He looked like what, Parker?" Reynolds cut in. "Like every other guy you've pushed around?" Silence. "Listen," Reynolds continued. "Things are different now. The chief's got connections, power, the mayor's backing. You went after the wrong guy. You better hope he doesn't make an example out of you." Parker gritted his teeth. "So, what? I just let him ruin my life?" Reynolds hesitated. Then, in a lower voice, he said, "Not if we flip the script first." Parker leaned forward. "I'm listening." The smear campaign. The next morning, the internet was on fire. Social media was filled with praise for Chief Williams, his handling of Parker's aggression, his calm and dignified response, his vision for a better police force. But deep in the shadows of certain forums and anonymous accounts, a different story was starting to emerge. A headline on a local right-wing blog read, "Newly appointed black police chief. Has a dark past. Here's what the media won't tell you." Inside the article was a mess of speculation and lies. It claimed Williams had ties to criminal organizations, that he had only gotten the job because of diversity politics, and that he had a vendetta against white officers. Within hours, the story spread. Conservative news outlets picked it up, twisting the narrative. They painted Parker as a good cop caught in a political war. They called Chief Williams an activist in a badge, someone who was dangerous for real law enforcement. And just like that, the tide began to shift. Parker sat in his apartment, watching the news, a smirk curling on his lips. Let's see how long Williams lasts now. The chief's counterattack. Chief Williams sat at his desk, reading through the latest smear articles. His jaw was tight, his grip on the papers firm, but his eyes remained calm. He had expected this. He had lived this. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. If they thought they could destroy him with baseless accusations, they were sorely mistaken. He pressed the intercom. "Sergeant Miller, get in here." Moments later, Miller entered, looking grim. "Sir, it's getting bad out there. The department's getting flooded with calls demanding your resignation." Williams nodded. "Let them talk." Miller hesitated. "With all due respect, sir, they're pushing for Parker's reinstatement." Williams let out a dry chuckle. "Oh, I bet they are." Miller leaned in. "What's our move?" Williams steepled his fingers. "The same thing I always do," he said. "We fight with the truth." The expose that changed everything. The following morning, the city woke up to a bombshell report. An independent journalist, one Williams had quietly contacted, had just dropped a 30-minute investigative piece. Title: "The Truth About Officer Parker, Exposing a Decade of Corruption." It was brutal. The report uncovered years of misconduct, hidden complaints, body cam footage that had mysteriously disappeared, all linked to Parker. It detailed dozens of racial profiling incidents, brutality cases swept under the rug, and even one wrongful death that had been buried by lack of evidence. The video spread like wildfire. Within hours, the hashtag #FireParkerForGood was trending, drowning out every smear attempt against Williams. Parker, sitting in his car, felt his stomach drop as he saw the headlines roll in. His past had finally caught up to him, and this time, there was no escape. Part 4. Parker's Last Stand. Parker's hands trembled as he scrolled through his phone. The headlines were relentless. "Disgraced cop's corrupt past comes to light. Will he face charges?" "The Fall of Officer Parker. How a routine stop exposed a decade of abuse." "Chief Williams claps back, shuts down smear campaign with facts." Parker felt like the walls were closing in. His career, his reputation, everything he had built on fear and control. Gone. But he wasn't about to roll over and accept defeat. Not yet. Desperate measures. Sitting in the dimly lit back room of a rundown bar, Parker met with the last person he ever thought he'd need, his old informant, Ricky "Slim" Coleman. Slim had spent years working both sides of the law. He knew how to dig up dirt, how to twist the truth, and most importantly, how to make problems disappear. Parker leaned in, lowering his voice. "I need something, anything, on Williams. A scandal, an old case he messed up. I don't care." Slim smirked. "You really think you can take him down after all this?" Parker's jaw tightened. "I have to." Slim studied him for a moment before sighing. "All right, I might have something, but it ain't cheap." Parker slapped a thick envelope of cash on the table. "Find it." The breaking point, meanwhile, Chief Williams sat at his desk, staring at the arrest warrant in front of him. Parker was done. The evidence against him wasn't just bad, it was damning. Body cam footage, deleted reports, witness testimonies. Enough to put him behind bars. Sergeant Miller stood across from him. "Sir, are you sure about this? Taking down one of our own?" Williams cut him off with a firm gaze. "A corrupt cop isn't one of our own." Miller nodded, handing Williams the official file. "Then let's bring him in." The final confrontation. That night, Parker sat alone in his apartment, drinking straight from the bottle. He had nothing left. His informant had come up empty. Williams was clean. No scandals, no skeletons in his closet. The man had built a career on justice, and Parker had no way to take him down. Then, a loud knock at the door. He froze. He already knew who it was. Slowly he got up, walked to the door and opened it. Standing there, flanked by 2 officers, was Chief Williams. Parker let out a dry laugh. Come to gloat? Williams' expression was unreadable. No, Parker, I came to do what should have been done years ago. He stepped forward. You're under arrest. Parker's smirk faded. He didn't move, didn't resist. For the first time in his life, he knew he had no way out. As the cuffs clicked around his wrists, the cameras flashed outside. The world was watching, and justice had finally caught up.